We wait a couple more minutes.
Yeah, we're waiting on 2 or 3 more, so maybe 1 or 2 minutes.
Thanks, Carla.
Should we wait until like 5 past and then get going, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. Make a start.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carla. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CCR Challenge Fund Application Guidance Workshop. So my name is Cheryl Moore, I'm the Programme Manager. I'm part of the Cardiff University Business School Delivery Fund team, and we work really closely with our colleagues in CCR and also colleagues in ERLab, which is a collaboration between Cardiff University and Nesta, an innovation lab. So between us all, we're delivering the Challenge Fund. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Carla. Thank you. So just giving a quick recap, really. I mean, some of you will have already attended previous workshops and seen the more detailed information on the programme. For those of you that haven't, we'll do a quick recap, but we will send you information afterwards on recordings that we've made previously, which give much more detailed information. So it's a 3.5-year programme ending in March 2024. The ultimate aim of the programme is to tackle societal challenges and/or service delivery issues. We're looking for public sector bodies to apply for the funding, and with the ultimate aim, if they're successful, of drawing down funding from the Challenge Fund and then going to procurement of R&D for innovative solutions. So we're not looking for things that already exist off the shelf. We're looking for new innovation, so R&D. Ultimately, it's looking to stimulate economic benefits for the region and build local wealth. So what we're hoping is that people will create jobs in the region. It will not only help our societal issues, but it'll also help our business community as well. We're also, because when you're working on things like this with public sector who are not always very geared up for innovation, it's also important to bring the procurement people along in those teams, so that at the end of this, if you do manage to develop, test, and actually deliver an innovative solution, you need to be able to buy it at the end. So you don't want to run into issues where you've developed that solution and then can't buy it because of procurement frameworks and things like that. So it's important to bring procurement along in the process with you. And we also have a sister programme called Infuse, which is European funded, and that's building capabilities within public sector bodies as well, by taking cohorts of public sector people through training around developing innovation. And we're looking to develop a community of practice. So there's development of a new website underway and a portal, so people will be able to join that and actually chat about the various challenges and things. Next slide, please. Is Carla still there? Thank you. So we've got 3 priority themes which were decided at a hackathon last year. So they include accelerating decarbonisation, improving the health and well-being of the region's citizens, supporting and enhancing transforming communities, which is quite a broad spectrum, really. So nothing is really out of bounds, I suppose, as long as it fits our criteria. Next slide, please. In terms of who's eligible to apply, so obviously the 10 local authorities that make up part of the Cardiff Capital region, but also other public sector bodies as well. So we're talking blue light services, health boards, anybody that fits the criteria. For challenges that reach receive funding, obviously everybody needs to try and tackle a societal challenge or a public service delivery. And it's about co-creation of those innovative solutions. So working with the people that you procure through the innovative R&D route and working with them to co-design that solution. Ultimately, we're trying to deliver economic impact in the region. When we go to procurement, we can't specify that it has to be a supplier in the region following this route. But obviously that's what we're aiming for. And to drive scalable opportunities. So those businesses that win the R&D contracts at the end of this, they maintain the IP, but on a license process basis, so that the public sector body can also use that technology or service, and then the company can go off and scale up that opportunity and create more and more jobs. This is very simplistic, by the way. Yeah, so you can access the CCR funding in order to support management, wraparound project delivery support. We tend to term the public sector bodies that receive challenge funding as challenge owners, and then the suppliers that come later down the route would be the solution providers. That's just some terminology that we tend to use with challenges. We can support feasibility projects, proof of concept, demo projects, that first stage implementation before the commercial scaling. Co-investment opportunities are possible. I put in brackets and welcome. I mean, ideally, we can leverage more funding from other sources, which obviously adds value then to the whole thing. Next slide, please. So the application process. Many of you will have already submitted an expression of interest online, and now you're at one of our workshops. So the programme delivery team are here to support people to develop those applications and really discuss any issues you have. So on the call, we've got Liz Rees, who's due to talk next. We've got Gareth Browning, who's from the Cardiff Capital region and manages the Challenge Fund. Carla, my colleague at Cardiff Business School, so she's working in the team with me. I can see we've got Shane on the call, who's a researcher attached to the programme. And there's also Alex, who's hidden away, I think. So we're not a big team, we're quite a small, perfectly formed team. But hopefully, we can give you support. And if the Challenge Fund isn't right for you, we can hopefully signpost you to somewhere else that will be more suitable for you. So the submission deadline is the 1st of October. All the challenge proposals are all assessed in exactly the same way, which Liz will talk about in more detail later. They go through various stages of assessment. There's the internal team, there's an approvals, an external board that give us advice. So they're an advisory board and they give us feedback and that broader picture from all different sectors. And then ultimately they go to the challenge board to be assessed. It sounds like a really convoluted process, but actually this will all happen in October because we want to get these challenges up and running and we want to get money flowing into the economy as quickly as possible. So I think that's it for me. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Carla. So if I can just quickly introduce Liz Rees. She's the CCR Challenge Fund Project Development Officer with a nice snappy title. And she's going to talk to you more now about general hints and tips around bid writing and yeah, just basic stuff, and then go through the actual application later on. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me? See me? Yeah.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Liz Rees, so with my snappy job title, as Cheryl said. I've been working on the Challenge Fund since April this year. Prior to that, I worked as a bid manager for a national charity, and prior to that, I worked in European funding, putting together structural funds applications. So I've got a lot of experience in putting bids together. So this is just a generic sort of hints and tips session, if you like. So we're sort of going on the assumption that there will be people on the call who've never written a bid before. So for those of you who have been involved in bid writing before, apologies if some of this is simple, but we need to make sure we cater for everybody. And I don't think it's a bad thing to sort of revisit some of the sort of just basic things, if you like. Carla, can you just get through the next couple of slides till you get to the funding one? That's it. So yeah, so we did have a bit of an overlap with some of the slides there, so I don't want to go through that again. So in terms of the funding, I just wanted to just sort of reiterate that it is a £10 million challenge fund. That does include the management and delivery costs as well. At the moment, we've only committed, I think, £400,000, which is the Cardiff and Vale COVID challenge. So there is a lot of money available that we're very keen to get out the door, really. And as Cheryl said, it is 100% funded, up to 100% funded, although we do welcome any additional funding that can be levered in. The box here is actually in the guidance, so you can just see the amounts there. I won't go through that because I said it is already there. So this is the amounts available. For example, if you're doing a feasibility study, then we wouldn't fund more than £500,000 on that. But that's obviously for later on when you've put your budgets together. Next slide, please, Carla. Thank you. So, okay, so before you actually start your application process, so identify your challenge idea, come up with a snappy one-liner. So basically, what is it that you want to do in 1 to 2 sentences? So not a long paragraph or piece of text, but just a snappy one-liner. What is it that your challenge is? What do you want to do with the funding available? Identify partners and colleagues involved in the application, as Cheryl did sort of touch on this briefly. So third sector organisations must have a public body as a partner. So link with other organisations in your region, and then create a challenge team to actually look at how you're going to put together the application, who's going to have responsibility for doing which sections, etc. Then engage with a challenge fund team. As Cheryl said, that we're not a big team, but we try and be as helpful as possible. So certainly before you start the application, you know, it is a lot of work. So you need to make sure that your idea is eligible, that you are eligible as an organisation, that your idea is feasible, but also are there any other similar challenges in development, so we could link you in with other organisations in the region. And you can, you know, you may have the same problem or a similar problem. It could be that you decide to do a challenge application with several strands and you each work on a different strand. Read all the application documentation fully. This is a really important one. And I know it's hard when you've got a lot of, there's always a lot of reading involved in these things, but it is really important that you sort of read and absorb as much as you can what it is we're actually looking for. And then set aside time to work on the application, which sounds a little bit patronising, but I know personally, best intentions sometimes go to pot. So if you can sort of develop a realistic time frame and try to stick to it, allowing for slippage. But it is really important that you give yourselves enough time to work on the application, because obviously the stronger your application, the more chance of getting funding. Next slide, please, Carla. Okay, so I've got some do's and don'ts here. As I said, these are really basic and they are obvious, but I don't think it hurts to revisit these at all. And I do include myself in that. Okay, so firstly with your application, so do assume that the reader has no prior knowledge of 1, your organisation, and 2, the subject area. So within the Challenge Fund team, we've also got the advisory board and then the strategy board, which has final say on whether applications are approved. So that consists of a wide range of people from different backgrounds, and there's expertise across a broad area of different subjects. But you can't assume that any of us will know anything about the subject that you're writing about your application. So just basically, if you can put things in layman's terms, anything that's confusing, too technical, if you can just explain it as best you can so that people do have a grasp of what you're trying to talk about. Use the assessment criteria to inform your application. So I'll come on to that in a few slides' time. But basically, if you refer to this throughout your application form, that will be really useful to you. So basically, are you addressing all the points within the assessment criteria? Obviously, this is the criteria that we're using to assess your submitted application. So if you can keep referring to that and just checking that you do have all points covered, all bases covered. Is there anything missing? Can you put anything more in a certain question, which will just score you more points? Stick to the word limit. So yeah, be concise. Obviously this isn't a tender process, so we're not going to cut you off. If it's a 1,000-word limit and you do 1,010, we're not going to say, oh, we're not reading anymore after that. So it's not critical, but obviously people assessing the application may lose interest if it goes sort of 500, 1,000 words over the word limit. So try and stick to it if you can. Make sure the information you're using is current, correct, and relevant. So if you're including evidence in your application, don't use sort of evidence from 10 years ago. Try and use information that is as up to date as possible. So that can be recent activity, recent things you've been involved with. That can be current policies, any evidence or statistics you've got that is fairly recent. And if you can reference all that if possible. And anecdotal things as well. It's not just about facts and figures. So don't include meaningless detail. It all has to be relevant to the point you're trying to make. Use examples and case studies where appropriate. So this can demonstrate really well what you're talking about, basically. So if you have got a case study, it's not always appropriate and depends what your application is about. But if you can use real life sort of case studies and examples, that can certainly make it brings it to life more, if you like, for the person reading it. And again, statistics and evidence to support the proposal. Again, that must be relevant and current. And as I said, anecdotal stuff can sometimes work really well, just as well as having facts and figures in there. Next slide, please, Carla. So just a few more do's. So do link to UK and Welsh Government policies if possible. That will strengthen your application. Be clear on what you're proposing to do. And I really can't emphasize this one enough, because particularly if it's a very highly technical problem that you're putting in your application. So be clear, concise, use layman's terms. If an application is confusing or unclear, then there is a chance it will be scored low because the assessor won't really understand what it is you're trying to say. So make it easy for us, basically, to score you highly. What do you want to do? Is it very clear? Can we actually grasp what it is you're applying for? And finally, ask a colleague to proofread prior to submission. I mean, some of you may be writing these applications on your own. Some of you may have, as I said, like an application working group. But before you submit anything, always proofread it for sort of spelling and grammar, and also factual errors. Obviously, this looks a lot more professional, and it does create a really good impression when people are assessing your bid. Next slide, please, Carla. Don't. Okay, so some of these are a bit blunt, but that is deliberate. So don't use jargon and acronyms, or if you do, please explain them once with the first time you use them, and then you can use them throughout the rest of the document. So don't assume that the assessor, the person reading the application, will know what the jargon means, what the acronyms stand for. So always explain the first time you use them, and then, as I said, you're free to use them throughout the rest of the application. Don't waffle, so be concise. Sorry, I just lost my third minute. Yeah, so if you think it's 1,000 words and you've only written 850, it's always best to leave it at 850 rather than just sort of include unnecessary information. Again, it's about impressing the assessor and allowing them to give you maximum marks where possible. So yeah, please don't waffle. Next one, copy and paste answers without reviewing. So yeah, don't do this. I mean, we've all been, I've written so many applications where I have thought, okay, well, I'll use this application I've done previously. That's a similar question. It's really important that you do review the answer you've used previously. I've seen some examples where people haven't even changed the font. So they just cut and paste from a previous application, and the font is all wrong, the formatting is all wrong. It does look really unprofessional. And also, if it contains information from your previous bid that has nothing to do with this one, again, it's not going to look good. It just reflects badly. Don't exaggerate or mislead. I think this is important because it can come back to haunt you at a later stage. So just be honest really with this. If you think that there are any sort of shortcomings or potential problems, put those in your application. We can discuss those with you. So don't make claims that can't be backed up by evidence or experience, really. And yeah, don't leave it to the last minute. As I said before, give yourself plenty of time to complete your application. I've had instances submitting bids where I've had lost Wi-Fi signal, IT has gone, things have crashed. So, you know, try and submit it before the deadline if you can. That said, again, this isn't a procurement process, so we're not bound completely to the deadline. So if you are experiencing any sort of technical problems when you're trying to submit them, please contact us and we'll try and be as flexible as we can. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go through the assessment criteria. As I said, this is in the application form, so we will touch on it later in the next but one workshop session. So I'll just run through it. So the assessment criteria, so it's the problem and need. So the problem should be well defined and understood by the challenge owner, the person submitting the application. The solution to the problem requires innovation, production of new knowledge, products, services, and/or capabilities, and there's no current off-the-shelf solution that you know of in existence. Outcome, as a minimum outcome, successful outcomes will deliver performance improvements for the public services. So this is financial and non-financial, significant, scalable, and sustainable. A place-based approach, so outcomes and improvements should be within the Cardiff Capital Region. Procurement, the approach can deliver benefits over traditional procurement approaches. Next one is market. So there will be a route to market, as Cheryl mentioned in her presentation earlier. Impact and scale, the resources to be engaged can realistically deliver a high impact in relation to the actual problem being addressed. Capacity and capability deliver. So is there a team in place to deliver the challenge, and is there a realistic timescale attached to this? Next slide, please, final slide. So just to reiterate that the deadline for the applications for round 2 are on the 1st of October. And if anyone has any questions, do you either want to sort of raise your hands or type something in the chat? As I said, we're going through the application in the next but one session, so you might want to leave them until then.
Thank you, Liz. It doesn't look as though we've got any questions at the moment, so yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Cheryl.
Cheers. So if we move on to our next speaker, it's my great pleasure to introduce Ali Smith from the SBRI Centre of Excellence. We're working really closely with the team to deliver challenges. I've worked with them already on our first challenge recently, and Ali can tell you more about the process and importantly, how to engage with the innovator community when you're developing your challenge application, thinking about that at the end of the process. So over to you, Ali. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. So good morning, my name is Alison Smith, and as Cheryl just said, I'm going to briefly talk about if you were to secure the funding for your challenge, how you would then write a strong challenge brief and get it out there to the innovators. So next slide, please. So I'll just tell you a bit about the SBRI Centre of Excellence. So I'm the business analyst at the SBRI Centre of Excellence, and we are funded by Welsh Government and hosted by Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board. So we work with public sector bodies to find out where their unmet needs lie within health. And then through funding, we would push out to find innovative solutions from business and academia. Next slide. So our services include, as I just said, part of my role is to go out and speak to public sector bodies to find out where their unmet needs are and to help resolve them. We also provide mentoring, and we can give free project management to public sector bodies. We are a training centre, do various training packages, and we also offer training through third parties at reduced costs, such as Prince 2. We're always actively seeking funding opportunities from various pots of money, and work closely with our procurement colleagues to try to make that process as stress-free as possible. Next slide. So the purpose of my presentation is to try and help define a successful challenge, how you could engage with the innovative community, and how you could then go on and successfully advertise that challenge. Next slide. So how would you define a successful challenge? So I think research what is out there and why it doesn't meet. Are there other industries using something similar that could be tweaked? Make sure that you're very clear about your problem and avoid any confusion if possible. Large challenges are extremely difficult to solve, but by focusing on smaller elements that will make it a lot more manageable, but also those smaller solutions may help work towards solving the bigger challenges overall. And it's easy to fall into the trap, as just mentioned then, of using jargon and acronyms. But again, these could mean very different things to different people, so they're best not used if possible. Critical friends. So we would be very happy to be a critical friend for you and read through your draft brief. So somebody like myself, who's not involved in the project or the background, I could understand that, then it's a good chance that other innovators would be able to. And I would say it's important to gain stakeholder collaboration as early as possible. So your counterparts in other areas are likely to experience something very similar or the same challenges you are, and they may have very different perspectives that you've not perhaps considered. So it's always good to open up those communications as soon as possible. And again, just look at what's out there in public policy and try and align those. And be passionate, really. So only you know what challenges you are facing. So allow that reader to be able to understand that and have some empathy for what you are going through. Next slide, please. So how can we make your challenge exciting to potential applicants? So just reaffirming what I've just mentioned, the brief needs to be very clear. Whilst we would ask you to be very open-minded about potential solutions, having clear outcomes really helps innovators and helps get the solution that you need. Bring your challenge to life. Let them know the background of your challenge and any impact such a solution could bring to you. Give them as much information as you can, including videos and key documents. And we always hold a supplier event, which we find is really useful, and we've had a lot of positive feedback from. So where key speakers are invited to come along and speak to potential applicants. They give you a lot more detail about their challenges, and then you can go on to answer questions, and it just really starts that engagement process. Next slide, please. So how could you go on then to advertise your challenge? So from the start, we have a communication plan, and that really outlines the communications and how they're going to be managed, and it's really helpful to have. I'd say you need to really go out and make friends. So we have a robust list of communication partners who are really helpful pushing out our challenges across their networks, and that really helps the word get spread widely. Our online portal is also used to advertise the challenge, but the team that are managing that portal are also a great help through sharing that through their wider networks. And they also help by targeting certain industry areas for it. There are many avenues to share communications with, and social media allows such more wider reach and more of an audience reach. So use every available avenue you have. And make sure your communications are appropriate and timely. And by timely, I would say not just the amount of times that you do send them out, but consider what time of day you're sending them out as well. And then designated resource, finally. We are very lucky within our team. Although we do have a small team, we always designate somebody to be the communication lead. And so if you can afford that resource, I would recommend it. Next slide, please. And finally, good luck. So I would like to wish you good luck with your applications. And if you do wish to have any guidance or advice from us, then there are details below. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. That was really useful. Does anyone have any questions around the SBRI process?
I was going to ask one question, just how that part fits in with the wider application. Do you win the application process and then advertise for innovators?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're successful in drawing down the Challenge Fund funding for your challenge idea, then you would go through the SBRI process, or maybe another process if it's more relevant, in order to procure the R&D side of your challenge fund to address it. It might be helpful if Gareth stepped in to explain that a bit more, because he's quite experienced in this.
Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, that's fine, Cheryl. So yeah, we're expecting challenges to generally follow the SBRI process because it's kind of tried and tested, as Cheryl has said. So, you know, with the experience I've got, with obviously the experience that Ali and the team in the SBRI Centre of Excellence have got as well, we're kind of well placed in Wales to support challenges that use that format. But we're also mindful there are other sort of challenge-based approaches which might follow kind of grants or innovation partnerships or other sort of approaches. So what I think is really important is we take the right approach based on the challenge that's identified. But if you take the SBRI process, the general way that works is that you frame the problem statement. So I suppose from the beginning, you bid into the Challenge Fund to access some funding. We will then obviously put it through our board processes to confirm the funding that we can allocate to your challenge. Now, I'm expecting there to be kind of two elements to the bid that you put in. I think Liz will probably come on to this. But it's the funding for if you like, the prize pot, so the money that goes to innovators. But you might also want to bid to us for a small amount of funding towards, you know, the resource element as well to help you to actually run the challenge. So this the kind of, you know, to enable you to engage a project manager maybe, or some additional support to actually to run the process. But generally, the SBRI process will follow funding a number of feasibility studies. So that might be 5 or 6 feasibility studies at typically anywhere from kind of 20 to 50,000 per project. And then those then get down selected at a second phase, of a demonstrator phase, where maybe you know, 2 or 3 demonstrators might be funded, and that could be at, you know, it could be 100k per demonstrator, it could be 500k per demonstrator. It depends on the nature of what it is you're doing, whether there's a large capital requirement. So each challenge will be different, which is why, you know, I encourage people to kind of take one-to-ones with our team, but also talk to people like Ali in the Centre of Excellence. The Welsh Government have got a lot of experience as well. So, you know, it's horses for courses to a certain extent. But yeah, hopefully that kind of generally answers the question. It's really difficult when there's a group of people, because you kind of need to go into the specifics on the individual challenge to understand. So if that doesn't answer it, and, you know, that applies to everybody on the call, please drop us a line and, you know, we can go into a bit more detail with your specific circumstances. Hope that helps.
That all makes amazing, perfect sense. Thank you.
Great. Good to hear.
Thanks, Gareth. Any other questions? No, doesn't look like. So I think it's back over to Liz now to talk us through the